Thank you very much, colleagues. For those that are coming in, welcome. Please post any chats and comments that you have, and we will be responding to them as we go through the presentation today. The recording will be shared on the website. Lerato will continue to update us in the chats where to access that information. Without much waste of time, colleagues, I think we should begin. I would like to welcome the head of the Jobs Fund, the DDG for Employment Facilitation. Najwa, are you there? And
yes, I'm here.
Awesome. She will give us a welcome address. Najwa, over to you.
Thanks, Mo. Good morning, everybody. I hope that you are all well and that you are weathering the Eskom storms. It really is a test of our resilience as a country to try and organize around these many disruptions. So I'm very pleased that there are so many of you on the call this morning, and I hope that you are going to feel at the end of the session that it was 1.5 hours well spent. So a warm welcome to all of you. As the Jobs Fund and as the head of the Jobs Fund, I look forward to hosting you. And, you know, today, it's something that we don't often find in South Africa. We spend lots and lots of money. I've just come out of a meeting and, you know, there was a couple of numbers that were being bandied about. For example, you know, we are spending 22 billion Rand on public employment programs. And then, you know, there's also the amount of funds that we spend on grants. And so in total, it would appear as if, you know, during any given year, we are spending around 70 billion Rand on social grants and public employment programs. Now, we all know that if we read the atmosphere and the kind of current situation in our country, there is still a sense of not enough is being done. I want to submit this morning that a part of that particular problem is that we don't do sufficient analysis and evaluation of the impact that our investments have had. And so I'm very pleased this morning that we are going to present to you the results of a longitudinal study that the Jobs Fund undertook with its partner, JET, in this instance. I think it's important work, and it's important for us to understand when we are making or when we are utilizing public funds, what is the real impact that this is having in the labor market? We have tracked a number of beneficiaries over a 3-year period. We have had a deeper understanding of what works when we are supporting small businesses and enterprises. And we see this as an opportunity to share what we have learned in the hope that the market actually adopts this evidence that we have gathered at the coalface. So we all know the arguments, you know, we are supposed to be supporting our small businesses. They can make a valid contribution. And yet we do not actually understand or fully understand the impact of the investment that we have made. We don't reflect on that necessarily as well as we should. And we then don't take the opportunity to improve the programs and align it better to what our small businesses require. So without saying anything more, I invite you to listen carefully to the research. The study was well constructed. The results, I hope that there is something in that for all of you who are participating today. My team have also said that, you know, it's very difficult to watch everybody's hand during a session, but we really would like to respond. So we encourage you to type all your questions in the chat, And as the presentation continues, we will try to respond to your questions, and there'll also be an opportunity at the end of the presentation to raise questions. So thank you very much. Over to you, Mo.
Thank you very much, Najwa. I welcome colleagues that have just come in. Welcome to the JF webinar on enterprise development. As Najwa has mentioned, we're giving feedback on the outcomes of the study of tracking outcomes on beneficiaries. We're gonna just go to a quick video. I think the team is just kindly note the Menti number there on top, colleagues. You can also scan it, and we just want to find out who is in the room. Just a quick number for Menti, 6736 1593. Lerato has also shared a link in the chats for colleagues that have just come in. Welcome. Please post your chats in the room there, and we will be responding throughout the meeting on some of the questions. We will also have a feedback session at the end. Just waiting as colleagues are logging in, and then we can all get to see the results of who is with us today. Just give us a better representation of the kind of engagements that we're going to have today. Please continue voting, colleagues. There's a link in the group, 6736 1593, menti.com. You see a lot of our colleagues from the public sector, followed by NGO and other. We welcome the SMME colleagues as well. This will be interesting findings. Thank you for the votes, colleagues. Just a few seconds. I think when we last checked, there's over 100 people in the room. Thank you very much for the votes. The public sector is well represented today, Najwa. Followed by the NGO sector.
That's good, Mo, that's good.
We would be interested to find out, colleagues, in the chats, the colleagues that are typing other, may you please describe for us your other organizations, please. It would be interesting to see where you are from as well. Thank you very much. Just few more seconds. I see other colleagues also joining. We will not take time, colleagues. Thank you very much. Should we move on again? We will probably still come back to the slides again, maybe, colleagues. It'll be interesting to keep track as well of that. These are some of the questions colleagues will keep on asking throughout the presentations. After every speaker, just a reflection on some of these things. Do current enterprise development programs interventions respond to the needs of SMEs? That was a quick vote. Are we doing enough and are responding to the type of SME interventions that are required? Or as some colleagues would say it, are we tailor-making our interventions? We have a lot of colleagues that disagree. Equally complemented by those that agree that we actually do respond to SMME needs. Please do follow up with some of the comments, especially those that disagree. We would like to pick brains with the speakers as well as they are presenting as well, to actually find out, are we really doing enough? And are we having a tailor-made approach to the needs of SMMEs?
Well, it's clear, Mo, we're not hitting the sweet spot, right? If there's an equal number of people who disagree, then we're not hitting the sweet spot. And hopefully in today's discussions of the research results, we can share what we've learned, and hopefully we then encourage people not to work in silos, but that we learn from each other and we take things forward.
Awesome. We still disagree. Shall we move on, colleagues, then? The next one, do current government legislative and policy contexts, are they responsive to the needs of SMMEs. So one was at a program level, and this one is at a policy level. Do we now have enough policies? Welcome, Lynette. We do hope that the conversations today will help answer some of the questions that you have. This is worrying, colleagues. We still have a lot of people that are disagreeing from a program point of view and from a legislative point of view, that we are just not doing enough and we are working in silos. So we are not responding to the needs on the ground. We look forward then to the session today and hear what the presenters are going to share from the research that they've done on a select number of SMMEs that were supported. Are we still disagreeing? And strongly disagree. Slide manager, thank you very much. What do you think the greatest challenges are faced by SMMEs today? You can actually rank some of these from 1 to 10, probably also related to some of the issues that we discussed around what the interventions at a program level and at the legislative level. Welcome to colleagues that have just come in. Please follow the mentee code that is being shared by our colleague Lerato. And you are welcome as well to post comments. We are keen to hear what you're thinking as well as you're typing some of these feedback.
And Mo Madley has a very interesting comment. She says, just about policy support, is the problem doing enough in quantity, or are we doing well enough quality? That's a very important question to answer.
So quality versus quantity. Thank you. It's interesting as well how the first slide when we asked who is in the room. So our colleagues as well that are also in the public sector working on some of these things are also reflecting on some of these areas. And the large companies, I think I saw someone comment that they are from one large company. So access to finance still features very high. We're not supporting SMMEs enough. As one entrepreneur says, I don't need support, I need money. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, Alexandra. So Alexandra says it's not just about money. They need to know as well how to access market, how to navigate the business sector, and the environment that they actually work. So there's a lot of, as we say, business support that is also needed. Thank you very much, slide manager. Colleagues, we shall begin the session. I'm going to introduce the head of monitoring and evaluation at the Jobs Fund, who will give us an overview and a background to the state tracer study and really answer this high level question in terms of why did we do this and what are we trying to actually track. I think as Natra started to say that we're interested in beneficiary outcomes as well, so that we understand that are we hitting the sweet spot. Vuyo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mo, and a very warm welcome again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to, again, a part one of our two-part webinar series on the outcomes of the 3-year longitudinal study. Very few people would disagree with the assertion that one of the foremost challenges that South Africa faces today is large-scale unemployment. The latest 2022 Q1 labor force survey data puts the unemployment rate at a staggering 34.5%. Now, when we take the expanded definition of unemployment for the first quarter of this year, we are sitting at 45.5%. Nearly half of the labor force, when we take the expanded definition, is unemployed. While we have seen some encouraging improvements for Q1 of this year compared to Q4 of the outgoing year, this easing in the numbers represents gains stemming from already record high levels of unemployment and is very little comfort to the 7.9 million South Africans that remain unemployed. In 2011, the Jobs Fund was capitalized with 9 billion rand, and it was tasked to discover and pilot innovative job creation models in partnership with private and public sector players. These partnerships were to promote the testing of innovative approaches to job creation in the South African context. They were to promote a shared risk approach to the funding of these innovative interventions. They were also to promote the market-wide adoption, as Najwa said, of successful models, as well as the use of the Challenge Fund instrument in driving better allocative efficiencies within government. The Jobs Fund has organized its sector-wide funding approach in terms of 4 broad funding windows. And these are enterprise development, support for work seekers, infrastructure, and institutional capacity building. Next slide, please. The Jobs Fund, like any publicly funded entity, has to consistently demonstrate its value and its impact in responding to the challenges that it was set out to address. This is because there is unending contestation for scarce resources, both in the public sector as well as in the private sector. It has therefore been critical for the Jobs Fund to incorporate in its design of its operations a rigorous monitoring and evaluation framework that allows it to track and demonstrate progress against headline objectives. Without these systems, none of our programs and interventions can usefully determine their effectiveness. These systems enable interventions such as the Jobs Fund to generate credible and reliable data on their work. These data promote improved intervention outcomes overall. They promote knowledge sharing across different public and private sector programs, thus making for evidence-based policy making. More often than not, however, these independent research inquiries usually take stock of changes observed at a single point in time. This means, therefore, that they are unable to pick up on further changes that may attend program outcomes over a longer period, thus curtailing their usefulness in terms of policy making. It is in part for this reason, therefore, that the Jobs Fund commissioned the 3-year Tracer study to more credibly answer the question on the sustained impacts of the Jobs Fund supported programs beyond the fund's period of involvement. Next slide, please. The 3-year Tracer study was also insisted upon by the head of the Jobs Fund out of a recognition that our beneficiaries are not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but are real human beings. They are our cousins, they are our brothers, our uncles, and our mothers. The study therefore sought to trace the lived experiences of our participants over a prolonged period so as to gather invaluable data and better understand the impact of the programs the National Treasury has supported through the Jobs Fund. In 2018, therefore, JET Education Services were appointed to conduct this ambitious study. The study was to trace participants from 10 Jobs Fund projects over the 3-year period. The 10 projects were split evenly between the fund's support for work seekers and enterprise development portfolios. Today's presentation will focus on the outcomes of the enterprise development projects, as Muketi has said. The study focused on the tracing of outcomes of participants post their involvements with a Jobs Fund supported intervention. The study was also to determine the extent to which we could attribute the observed changes in participants' lives to the supported interventions. Our ability to generalize the study's outcomes across our support for work seekers and enterprise development portfolios was important in understanding which interventions are effective, replicable, and scalable. The ability to generalize across these portfolios would give us a better understanding on which job creation models present better value for money in addressing barriers to entry in the South African labor market. The Tracer study overall was able to consistently trace over 1,700 participants in 3 years. A remarkable feat, considering that some of the data collection took place both during the COVID lockdowns and the civil unrest around July of last year. The Tracer study has, by our estimation, come to some very interesting and informative insights on the key results questions that we had set out to answer. When these results are viewed in the context of what was an already declining economic growth outlook in the country, which was further exacerbated by the advent of COVID, they are that much more impressive indeed. The results speak to the resilience and fortitude of our beneficiaries and their businesses, aided by the holistic support designed and delivered by our program partners. Highlights of the results under the enterprise development window point to, amongst other things, how a significant majority of business owners were still running their own businesses 3 years on. They point to how about 20% of those business owners were also running additional businesses. Over 93% of businesses kept financial records and had seen growth in the average salary paid to business owners over the 3-year period. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you now to engage with us as we present to you the enterprise development outcomes of the 3-year Tracer study. I will now hand over back to my colleague, Moketi. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fuyo. Colleagues, we are just going to hand over to Jed. I think a video is about to start shortly, and the findings from Jed will be presented by Eleanor, who is the executive manager for SMME, who's been leading this study, and James Kiwi, who is the CEO of Jed. Is the video ready?
We're good to go, Moketi. Thank you.
Over to you, James.
I'm not sure it's a video, but we'll put our cameras on. Thanks, Moketi, and thanks for the opportunity, colleagues. Good morning to everybody. I think the study was such an important study for JET in terms of our work over the last couple of years. And as Vuyo just said, and Moketi just said, and Najwa also spoke, it's been an incredibly difficult time in our country. Despite that, I think what we will talk to you about today would be some light at the end of the tunnel around some of the things in our country that is working. The Jobs Fund has been in place for more than 10 years. And I just looked at the Jobs Fund website again this morning and looked at the history, and Najwa and colleagues, of course, you would know better than any of us about the history. But it's interesting to note that more than 10 years ago, the Jobs Fund was really looking at co-financing and using public money as a catalyst for innovation and change in our country. We see a lot of this work happening internationally at the moment. We see a lot of it happening in health, and we see the World Bank and others getting very involved in this kind of debates. But as South Africa, we've actually been at it for more than 10 years. So what Eleanor is going to talk to you about in a few minutes would be the findings from the Tracer study. A couple of highlights from the Tracer study over the last nearly 6 years. We started out with a study that was going to be 3 to 4 years. It ended up being 6 years for the reasons, as we all know, in our country and the context that changed. We found a couple of good things. We found a high rate of sustained business ownership. We found employment and business grown over time. The project succeeded in creating new jobs and helping work seekers, the majority of which were female. We saw innovative job creation. Now, of course, it's not all bright and kind of all good news, but we definitely found some good news. So what my colleague Eleanor Hazel is going to talk to is the findings over the next 20-25 minutes. We also want to give credit to Kamal Maroc as well as Gordon Freer, who were part of this process and who advised us as we went along the research. What you see on the slide, and I'm not going to talk to these indicators, would be this is our country at the moment. And our country, and you can also see some international data, is really in trouble. And we hope that what we can tell you today would be some positive news and also some really good things happening from a government perspective. Many of you on the call today are from government. Government is not all bad. There are things that are happening in government that is also good. So let's give credit where credit is due, and let's build on the good things in our country. Eleanor, I'm going to give over to you. If you can start talking to the findings, if you're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James, and colleagues from the Jobs Fund. I'm now going to share some of the findings from the study that we conducted. It was 3 years of data collection, and then longer than that if you count in the time preparing and then wrapping up, writing up afterwards. So there were 5 enterprise development projects which were profiled in our study, and these were very diverse projects. Some of the Jobs Fund partners from these projects are in the room, and you will be hearing from a couple of them a bit later. So 2 of the enterprise development projects supported informal businesses. These were targeting retail sector businesses. ED1 was supporting existing retail businesses. Some of them had been around for many years. And ED2 was supporting startup businesses, so new informal businesses starting from scratch. Very different challenges that they might face and types of support needed. Then 3 of the projects, ED3, 4 and 5, were supporting formal businesses and different models of enterprise development support here. There were 2 franchise models. One was specifically focused on the healthcare sector, and one was providing incubation support, both to startups as well as existing businesses that would want to grow in a variety of sectors. And the franchise businesses were they were startup businesses also. If we can go to the next slide. So this is our data collection. Vuyo touched on it. In total, it was close to 2,000 surveys conducted over 3 years. But for enterprise development specifically, we reached 596 respondents in 3 years. We had an attrition rate of around 23%, which we thought was pretty good for a 3-year telephone survey conducted during a pandemic and other troubles in the country. And we had a good response rate from each of those 5 projects. We have to note, though, that ED3, 4 and 5, the sample size is quite small. These were the projects supporting formal businesses, and the number of businesses that were supported was less than the projects that were supporting informal businesses. We also conducted interviews, and there were 2 deep dive case studies of 2 of the enterprise development projects. We looked at the data in the grant management system, and we did a cost effectiveness analysis. Next slide, please. So first, let's take a look how the projects did in terms of selection and targeting. They were mostly all successful in targeting the participants that they said that they were going to target, and these were primarily individuals from previously disadvantaged backgrounds, either who already had businesses or who wanted to start businesses. 4 out of 5 projects did really well in terms of targeting. The ED3, they did quite well in terms of targeting previously disadvantaged entrepreneurs from previously disadvantaged backgrounds, but they were less successful in reaching females. But 2 other projects had explicit targets around gender, and they were successful in reaching female entrepreneurs. One area that the projects weren't so successful in, though, was reaching people with disabilities. So very few people with disabilities participated in any of the ED projects. So that was probably a missed opportunity there. Next slide, please. So this slide presents summary statistics from the GMS, the grant management system. In total, the projects collectively created 4,315 new permanent jobs and 748 short-term jobs, and placed 137 individuals in vacant permanent positions. Now, these jobs were primarily held by females from previously disadvantaged race groups who were youth aged 18 to 35. So even though the entrepreneurs may have been slightly older in general than the work seekers that were targeted, the jobs that were created primarily went to young people. Again, there was a missed opportunity here, though, in terms of employment of persons with disabilities. Just 2 of the projects employed 1 person each with a disability. Let's move on, please. Some really good news in terms of business ownership. There was a high rate of sustained business ownership. So over 80% of the survey respondents that we reached, these 596, they were still running a business as their primary economic activity. Over 75% of them were still running the business that they received support from the Jobs Fund for. 7% of them, that business had closed, but they'd actually started a new business. And bear in mind that these projects started between July 2012 and January 2017. So that was a really long time ago, by the time, for some of these projects, by the time we did our 3rd round of survey in 2021. And it's really, this is really impressive. We know from research conducted elsewhere that informal businesses have a rate of around only 40% of them, 40% of them close within the first 6 months. So ED1 and ED2 in particular, they were the projects that targeted informal businesses. We also had quite a high rate of, as I mentioned, people who started the supported businesses. The business failed, but then they started a new business. And this was actually increasing over time. So 1 in 3 people who no longer owned the supported business were running a new business as their primary economic activity. And then there were also people who were running a business on the side in addition to, for instance, studying or having a job. Next slide, please. Another phenomenon that we found was quite a high and growing number of people running multiple businesses. We do recommend some further investigation of this. So in 2020, there were 17.6% of the respondents running multiple businesses. This increased slightly to 19.3% in 2021. This could be good or this could be bad. So the proliferation of businesses could be seen as individuals broadening their economic activity, reducing risk through diversification. But the new businesses are likely to be similar in terms of business maturity as the initial businesses, with limited opportunities for instance, increased market penetration, profitability, growth, or employment. Next slide, please. Some information about the characteristics of the businesses that were active in our survey. The vast majority of them were micro enterprises. In fact, 38.4% of them did not have any employees at all. This was self-employment for the business owner. Just 3 of them were, according to South Africa classification, small businesses, and 1 of them was a medium enterprise. Over time, during the Tracer study, these figures were shifting slightly. And as compared to when the same survey was conducted in 2020, there were slightly fewer businesses with no employees and slightly more micro businesses with employees. So there was some growth over time, but this seems to be very challenging, but really not surprising and good news given the context. The businesses were of varying ages, and that indicates the different project start dates as well as the different project models, some working with new and some working with already established and existing businesses. And that longevity of the new businesses in particular, that was ED2, ED5 and ED3 was really encouraging. Next slide, please. So the businesses, here we're looking at financial inclusion. The one on the top left is access to banking. So the majority of respondents said that their businesses had access to banking, and this included all of the formal businesses. But this was actually something that had declined. since 2020, between 2021 and 2020. Access to credit, this was less widespread. This is the bottom on the left. This had also declined slightly between 2020 and 2021. Insurance on business assets, top right here, very important under times of crisis and upheaval, like the afflictions in KwaZulu-Natal that small businesses experienced last year. This varied considerably across the projects. So it was only ED3 and ED4 where the majority of respondents had insurance on either some or all of their business assets. The majority of the informal businesses, they had no insurance. And this proportion of uninsured businesses had also increased between 2020 and 2021. Slide at the bottom right shows business debt. There have been some comments on this already in the chat. So in 2021, twice as many respondents had reported business debt as those reporting business debt in 2020. There was an increase in indebtedness between the survey waves for the beneficiaries of each project. So this could be good or bad, depending on whether it's debt to finance growth or because the business is in financial difficulties. And overall, in general, there were quite low levels of business debt, but we will come to this a bit more later in terms of specific challenges. Next slide, please. Some other trends that were a bit concerning, but unsurprising given the context. There was a decline in the proportion of businesses with licenses or permits to operate. This mainly affected the informal businesses. You can see from the graph ED3, ED and ED5, almost all the orange bar means they need a license or a permit to operate. The maroon bar means in ED5, all the businesses that needed a license or permit to operate had it. But this was a challenge for the informal businesses, ED1 and ED2. And this had also declined, between survey waves between 2020 and 2021. There was also a decline in businesses registered for VAT and businesses registered for income tax, as well as a slight decline in financial record keeping. But overall, the results for small businesses keeping financial records and books were very encouraging. This is the bottom left. The question there was, do you keep financial records or books? So 93.6% of respondents said they do keep financial records and books, and 81.3% said that the expenditure of the business as well as their personal income was recorded separately. There was a slight decline of this between 2020 and 21. But nonetheless, when you look at another survey conducted, the Statistics South Africa survey of employers and the self-employed found that 78.9% of individuals running informal businesses kept no accounts whatsoever. So there was definitely better practices amongst the supported businesses here. Next slide, please. Here we've got some really good news in terms of employment. Takeaway here is that employment in the enterprise development businesses is increasing over time. In 2021, 502 business owners said that they were employing 966 individuals. So this was an increase of 72 as compared to the previous year. And in 2019, the first year we conducted the survey, there were 783 persons employed in those same businesses. So there you can see the orange, red, and grey, the employment growing over time. There are different trends for the different projects. So in total, the formal businesses have the highest number of employees per business, probably unsurprising. But the project models that see a steady increase year on year in employment is ED1, which was informal retail sector businesses, and ED5, which was healthcare franchise businesses. So they see growth over time. There was actually a loss in employment between 2020 and 2021 for ED4, ED3, and ED2. And ED3 businesses, they actually employed fewer people in 2021 than they did in 2019. But again, not really that surprising given challenges in the context. There was another trend that was slightly concerning around contracting. So the security of tenure of contract had decreased slightly. There were fewer individuals with permanent contracts and more individuals with no contracts. But this is also in line with national trends reported in Statistics South Africa surveys, and very related to the context of what was happening in the country. Next slide, please. Here we look at owner income. So the average owner salary, that's the top left-hand bar. The orange on the far left is the salary before the project, because some of the models were supporting existing businesses. Then the maroon bar is immediately after the project. The grey bar is wave 1, that was 2019. The green bar is 2020. And the orangey coloured bar on the right is wave 3. So average salary paid to owners increased up until 2020 for 4 of the projects, but then it declined for everyone between the second and third survey waves. And we're sure this would be due to the economic impact of COVID-19. The informal business owners, they were less likely to, they earned less, but they were more likely to withdraw money from the business for personal use and stock and services. So we did also consider that when we looked at owner income and other use of withdrawals from the business. We can go to the next slide. This one looks at business growth and expansion. Some more good news here. On the top right, we looked at, these are businesses which had grown or expanded. The first orange bar is at the time of the first survey in 2019, we said, has your business grown or expanded since you participated in the project? And here, 63.2% of respondents said it had. The next year we asked, has your business grown or expanded in the last 12 months? Again, the majority of respondents said it had. The grey bar is in 2021, whilst COVID was still an active pandemic that was affecting businesses greatly. Despite this, there was still 33.1% of business owners said their business had grown or expanded in the past 12 months. And the economy in South Africa was contracting at this point in time. So the main ways they said their businesses had grown was having greater profit, having more clients, and offering more or different goods and services. And notably ED5 on the right, their businesses had expanded in 2021, but these were businesses in the healthcare sector. And we also asked about business optimism. Do you think your business will last for the next 5 years? And really positive results here. The majority of business owners thought their businesses would survive for the next 5 years. And this was actually increasing over time, even though the circumstances were challenging. I think we can go to the next slide. Sorry, this one's a little bit small maybe, but on the left, we've got the main challenges affecting business growth, and on the right, the main types of business assistance required. So I'll just unpack this. Interesting to see in voting results earlier this morning. So when this survey was conducted in 2021, COVID-19 was the top challenge that the business growth, affecting business growth. This was followed by access to finance. And these were the same challenges in the previous year as well. But other challenges that were reported were very varied, and they were very different for the different business models. So for instance, for the formal businesses, challenges that they faced were access to markets, finding skilled staff, and crime. Also regulatory problems, infrastructure for the healthcare businesses, access to electricity and competition. For the informal businesses, the challenges that they mainly faced were some of the same: regulatory problems, crime, access to electricity, bad debtors, competition, regulatory problems featured heavily, and also being unable to meet demand or access markets. But this was also conducted at a time when there were some restrictions on movement and business trading. But important to note that all or any of these challenges could be binding constraints to business growth, depending on the circumstances. So then the type of business assistance that the business owners said that they required, these related to the challenges. The top request by 2 out of every 3 respondents was access to finance. This was followed by access to raw materials or supplies, which was in particular requested by the informal business owners, and easing in government regulations. Again, also a big assistance request from the informal business owners. Also alternative business premises. But I do agree with comments made in the chat. It's not just giving access to finance is not going to solve this problem. In fact, one of the businesses which was in our study, a main focus of that model was around providing access to finance. It was, but there were challenges with that, and a number of the respondents from that that had been through that project actually came out and were facing financial difficulties because of having been able to get access to finance. So very important that there is support provided at the same time that access to finance is facilitated. Let's move to the next slide. This looks at the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and what support was available to them to access. So the vast majority, over 90% of businesses, I'm sure unsurprisingly, said they were affected by COVID-19 in 2020. 3/4 of them were still affected in 2021 when we conducted our survey. But just half of them had actually received any form of business support to address the challenges of COVID-19. And this was there were great differences by project model. So the vast majority of the support was provided by the Jobs Fund or by Jobs Fund partners. And this was primarily by 2 Jobs Fund partners. So ED1, they actually received COVID-19 relief funding from the Jobs Fund and dispersed a once-off grant of 6,000 Rand to supported businesses to assist with economic hardship resulting from COVID-19. And these were informal retail businesses. ED3 and ED4, half of those business owners were able to access support in the form of money from UIF and TERS. And ED5 provided support to the healthcare businesses, specifically around training, personal protective equipment. The ED2 business owners, who were also informal businesses, retail sector startups, they really struggled to access any kind of business support. And this was really striking for us, that particularly for the informal businesses, the main place that they could go to get support from was the Jobs Fund or the Jobs Fund partners. Let's move on. Then we did a cost effectiveness analysis. So here we looked at money spent in relation to the number of jobs created. We were able to benchmark this study. GDP per capita is an accepted benchmark for local CEA's cost-effective analysis studies. So a cost of less than GDP per capita, an average cost is very cost effective. Less than 3 times GDP per capita is cost effective, and more than 3 times GDP per capita is less cost effective. So what we found from the CEA, we also looked at the average cost per job, the average cost per job excluding training, and the average cost, just the Jobs Fund grant portion, excluding the leveraged funding. So the most cost-effective projects were ED1 and ED2 that were supporting the informal businesses, as well as ED4 that was also cost-effective. But what we have to note about this is that it provides rather crude results, and we were a little uncomfortable with just comparing average cost per job when the project models were very different in terms of who they targeted, the types of businesses they supported, how long the support was provided for, and also the success and sustainability of the supported businesses over time. And some of them also had social value. ED5 that was supporting healthcare startup businesses. Let's go to the next slide. So what we did to add a bit more nuance to the cost effectiveness analysis was we identified some value for money criteria and indicators to provide a more holistic assessment of this. But this is the JET research team's criteria and indicators, though it hasn't been kind of collectively determined, but I think it could be something to consider for future. So the criteria were assessed against an indicator or indicators, and there was a 5-point scale, 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. So we looked at cost effectiveness, we looked at permanent jobs created in relation to the target, we looked at employment equity, so employment of women, youth, previously disadvantaged race groups and persons with disability, percentage of businesses still running, also the business growth or development in terms of turnover, and whether owners were drawing an income for their business. So overall, when we looked at it from those criteria, instead of just cost per job, in fact, ED5 came out as providing the best value for money, but all of the projects provided adequate or fair value for money. And we identified ED1, ED2, and ED4 as potentially good candidates for scaling to other provinces and other settings and types of businesses. ED5 is quite early days to recommend for scaling, but it was looking very promising. So based on this, what conclusions can we draw? So as you saw at the start, the targeted participants were largely reached, but we think there should be greater consideration for who the right participants are. Bear in mind, these were projects supporting existing or new potential business owners, and we would like to see more there in terms of accommodating and targeting and reaching people with disabilities and female entrepreneurs. Also offering these projects outside of the large metropoles in South Africa. They were predominantly in 2 provinces, the ED projects, although there were people from 8 of the 9 projects that were participants. Next slide, please. Some more considerations for the Jobs Fund specifically about promoting integration between the ED and the SFW projects so that people could move between enterprise development and work seeker spaces, opportunities for work seekers to be employed in the ED supported enterprises, or for work seekers who want to start businesses to be referred to Job Fund partners that can help them with those. We also think there's potential for expanding innovative products and practices across projects. There was a point of sale terminal in ED1, which we thought could perhaps benefit some of the other ED project models, which we looked at, specifically ED5, which had challenges with cash and stock there. Overwhelming evidence that Jobs Fund partners can be can be effective conduits for supporting informal business during times of crisis. And we think that this could also be utilised to provide information about where and how to access SMME support. There is a lot of support available, but business owners and informal business owners in particular find it very difficult to access that support. We saw that there were very low levels of uptake of COVID-19 business support. Next slide, please. This is the last one, I think. Oh, not quite the last one. We would like to see more and better available national data on small businesses. It was quite difficult for us to benchmark and compare the businesses in our survey to other businesses in South Africa, and also employment and unemployment of persons with disabilities. That was very difficult to find benchmarks for. Satisfaction and dissatisfaction regarding specific partners and projects should be taken seriously and investigated. One of the projects, there were some participants who were unhappy with the project model and their project experience. Have a long-term view with respect to job creation via enterprise development. It takes longer than supporting work seekers directly, and also consider the social value as well as the cost per job. There are methodologies like social return on investment that can assist with that. And now this really is our last slide. Some considerations and recommendations for those who offer support to SMMEs. Continue supporting initiatives in growth sectors and areas, as well as value chains, but also continue supporting SMMEs in sectors or areas which may not be high growth, like retail, for instance, but they can support sustainable livelihoods. Definitely a priority to reduce the red tape that makes it onerous for SMMEs to do business, to grow, to employ people and to contribute. Potential for staying in contact with project beneficiaries after the fact. A number of the Jobs Fund partners were still in touch with the individuals that had been through their projects, and keeping those support channels open is useful, for instance, during times of crisis. We think all ED support models should consider how to address some of those most common challenges which we identified, as well as challenges which are pertinent for the specific issues that people in their programs are dealing with, or just know how and where to refer them to people that can help. Be responsive to emergent needs. ED1 introduced access to funding or to loans, as well as bulk stock buying, which was very appreciated. That was something that came in when the project was underway. And there is need for a range of types of funding support, but it's complex, as has been noted in the chat. There's other types of support that need to go with that. And where possible, utilize technology to enhance efficiencies. ED1 did that successfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thank you very much, James. For colleagues that have been just coming into the session, please take note of the Menti link, and please do also share some of your questions and feedback on the discussion that we just had from James and Eleanor. Eleanor, as we are starting with the, sorry, as the colleagues are busy with Menti, as the colleagues are busy with Menti, I mean, the first thing that stuck out, we are not doing well in terms of targeting people with disabilities. I mean, that should be sending chills down our spines when we think about, we are good at targeting women, targeting people from previously disadvantaged areas, but we are not doing well with targeting people with disabilities. Is this a trend all across enterprise development initiatives? What are we getting wrong? I think I just wanted to just highlight some of that And I'm going to pick also on some of the questions that the colleagues were posting in the chats. Can we just ponder on that one first, Eleanor? What are we not getting right with targeting PDIs?
I mean, to start with, none of the projects were actually saying that they specifically did target persons with disabilities. One of the work seeker projects that was included in our study was doing that. And that was in fact the only project that did really well at it. So yeah, just having that intention from the outset and building it into your project design can do a lot, I think.
Should the same be done when you mentioned about financial inclusion? There was a question around issues of over-indebtedness of enterprise development partners. Is financial inclusion or financial packages, should that be a core design of enterprise development initiatives in whatever way that can be, in order to ensure success of the entrepreneurs?
So this one is also, I don't think there's necessarily a kind of a one size fits all when it comes to this. So 3 out of the 5 enterprise development projects did have access to did facilitate funding and finance in some way. 2 of them did it. The 2 that were supporting informal businesses, I think the amounts were much smaller. And the support for, in one case, starting a business, and in the other case, specific business expansion was greatly appreciated. The formal business model, where this was a core part of the model, some of those businesses did really well. They also had the highest business failure rate. We say it was high stakes. You had the potential to go into this project and do really well and come out with a viable business. But there were people that went through that project model who had lost a great deal financially, personally. Some people had mental health problems and real personal challenges. And we did feel that when public money is involved, it's really critically important that there's responsible lending and there is support that goes alongside that, particularly when the country goes through an economic crisis.
So responsible lending standards. Thank you for that, Eleanor. I see as the colleagues are voting there in terms of which options or which of the recommendations think should stand out. Tailor-made support comes out, having the right intervention for the right audience, improvement across coordination. This reminds me of the earlier slide, the first slide we had around our participants today, reduce regulatory takes. So there actually is, there's a need for a package to be sufficiently designed to meet what the audience have asked for. So the one last comment that also stuck out was the issue of competition and regulation around, especially for the informal sector. And I think it was a comment raised by Fidelis. When we were comparing some of the challenges faced by the formal sector and the informal sector, one of the things that you've highlighted there is that there was the issue of market access, and then there was issue of regulatory issues.
Yes, I think some of these were also, related to the COVID-19 context, when people essentially had to have permits to operate and do business. And we know it was difficult for informal businesses to obtain those. And there was restriction on movement. So the requirements to get permits increased and we know that it was very difficult for people with informal businesses to get those and to access those. So I think we really need to do better and think about how those are going to impact on informal business owners for whom it's their main source of livelihood, and who's best placed to help them. The Jobs Fund partners, where they did help them, I think they were well placed to do so.
Awesome, thank you. And I see Monica commenting on the issue of finances. Well, thank you, Monica, and welcome. That the approach seems to be short-term instead of long-term, and this relates to the finance questions. So colleagues, without what's let's see where we are now. So we still, the first top three are tailor-made support for SMMEs, improve coordination around government, support SMMEs in growth sectors. Before we move on to our next reflection, Eleanor, based on the studies, and I know we've reflected a lot on this, I mean, what does the study tell us about high growth sectors? Are we really supporting high growth sectors? I mean, what is the indicator of the kind of interventions going into these areas tell us about high growth sectors?
So none of the ED project models were explicitly targeting high growth sectors. Some of the SFW project models were, and they were very successful. So we think there is potential for ED project models to explicitly target growth sectors and probably achieve some really good results. But it's equally important to, and I see that the participants in the webinar agree, to ensure that we don't neglect sectors where there might not be huge growth potential, but this is actually a massive support for people's livelihoods. And there is actually growth that can be achieved by improving business efficiencies, by supporting businesses to overcome some of the challenges and hurdles that they face. The ED1 businesses were steadily growing employment during challenging times in formal sector retail businesses.
Awesome. Eleanor, looking at that, having compared issues around not supporting high growth sectors, what types of products and services are we talking about that have shown more resilience and sustainability? And how competitive are these in the type of concentrated markets that we are in? I'm just feedbacking on that question on the regulation and competitive market.
So, sorry, can you just rephrase the question?
No, it's worrying. The types of products and services that showed more resilience, and in the types of sectors that you just mentioned, because we are talking about a concentrated and competitive market, what are we seeing from the study?
So there were some businesses, healthcare sector businesses, they also did very well. There was a pandemic going on, and they in some ways benefited from some aspects of the pandemic because there was greater demand and need for healthcare, and other public facilities were overwhelmed. So there were opportunities created there. I think there were also opportunities in the retail sector, though it was difficult, it was challenging. And the devices that enabled better stock management and enabled the expansion of products which were sold. I'm sure one of the Jobs Fund partners in the room might speak to that a bit later. That was really a good product and service that was timely and seemed to work well.
Well, healthcare and the retail sector. Do you think then we should be advocating more to restrict dominant players in this market so that we create more opportunities for smaller players to also have a stake in the market?
I would be in favor of, rather than restriction, like better support to even the playing field in that way, rather than by creating more regulations.
No. Awesome. Thank you very much, Eleanor. And I think you are right in that Tina and Jerome will actually be better positioned as they're also reflecting on the study and what it means for the type of interventions that they have designed. Thank you very much, Eleanor. Colleagues, we'll move on to the next section. Tina Mason is the Chief Operations Officer at A2Pay. She's also one of the projects that she leads. It was one of the projects that was in the study. Jerome Eccles is the General Manager for Entrepreneur Development of Black Umbrellas. Black Umbrellas was also one of the projects that was part of the study. Tina and Jerome, are you ready to share your reflections? Tina?
Unmute, Tuna.
There we go. I can. Thank you. I'm certainly ready.
Awesome. Over to you, Tina.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Moketi and Jobs Fund team, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And Eleanor and Jet, must compliment you on what must have been one of the toughest times to ever do an audit and research survey. And then just to all the people who are listening in, I'm sure it's fantastic to have you, and mostly thank you for giving me this opportunity. Let me quickly talk about what we've been doing on our side. I'm going to set my timer so that I don't run over, because that's very important, and I'll leave a little bit of time for questions afterwards. So we unpacked a project which was to reduce the barriers to sustainable employment through the application of technology. And these were merchants that were coached in 2017, 2018, and 19. And we have continued to grow the base, but at that time, I think 900 recipients were audited. What we did was we had this very fantastic backbone, a transactional database, which allowed us to craft a tool that solved much of many of the pain points. So essentially, without technology, a merchant is not in control of their business. And although most of our merchants are highly effective entrepreneurs, despite market telling you otherwise, we discovered that where people had been running a business, they could take advantage of the technology and the coaching and apply the knowledge to their working experience. And we underestimate just how important that experience is. We also tried to solve the problem of access to finance through enabling the technology to address how to control the business, like Eleanor said, stock management, reports, and showing people how their business was actually performing today versus last month and the month before, end of month and month end and the month before, okay? So we really tried to identify the 5 main points. I've put 4 of them there. Unregulated market was one of the others, and to try and facilitate how to solve the problem through the technology solution and the coaching methodology. And we don't really talk about training. We talk about trying to change behavior, because if you focus on training, there's an end to it. Whereas changing behavior requires time and input and a process. Nobody changes their behavior overnight. And we're really looking to change the behavior where we move from a cash to a digital world, where we increase retail disciplines and increase numeracy and respect of the business. So our whole methodology is based around that. As I said, we focus on entrepreneurs that have skills already. And where we've done that effectively, we get a great return on investment for the initial money that we put into the business. When you look at the longevity of the business and you divide that by the amount of money that was there over time, it really is an insignificant amount of investments. We also created a financial services company in 2019, where we worked with merchants to give them access to capital for working capital, capex, and working capital capex and building back rooms in order to de-risk their businesses. This was a developmental credit license. Because of the technology background, and I'm sorry I missed a naught there, it's 21,000, not 2,100, we were able to support 1,700 merchants over a 3-month period, providing them with a week's worth of capital to procure stock over 3 months. And this really, really made a colossal difference to the survival of the businesses. The technology network allows us to do both wholesale, as Eleanor mentioned before, so we're solving the bulk buying problem, as well as providing 12,000 needy households with hampers. And we worked through the value chain there and the retail chain. Our constant focus is how do you bring additional technology and coaching to mitigate against market shocks, against COVID, and we're using products like solar solutions, UPSs, speed points, and market integration through media screens. We've also worked in a very focused fashion just in the spaza sector, but we are looking to open up into other areas in the informal sector. We don't talk about it as an informal sector. We talk about it as a primary market. And so we are now starting to spread across, but using the same technology platform and the same coaching methodology. And we also opened an NPC in 2019 to secure additional funding, because we recognize that the social purpose work that we do is commercial. You can commercialize it over a period of time, but it takes much longer than what people anticipate. So that's really the first slide. Let's go to the next slide. Adopting some of the recommendations. So regional penetration is on track. So we have 7 provinces now that we're working in, and we will be now starting to go to the smaller towns. We also are partnering with a municipality. I see one of our partners is on the phone here, and we have got really evidence now of how the combination of product, coaching, a device that allows people to control their business actually does reduce the barriers to sustainable employment. We have partnered with Harambee in the past, and we could investigate this further, i.e. linking up unemployed youth in the market with the enterprise side of it, with the SMEs. Some of our spaza shops actually employ 8 to 10 people. We've seen an increase in youth running spaza shops. In our 2 or 3 years ago, it was about 10%. And at our latest quarterly report, we're sitting at about 26%. So we are seeing young people coming into the business and opening up these spaza shops, which is very exciting. As I said, the technology is one of the things that has allowed us to scale and differentiate. It remains a critical factor in the business. And communication remains a massive challenge in our market. If you think about working between 7 different provinces, each of the provinces are different, and this market is so fluid and changing, and we put a great deal of store on that. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else I want to mention. No, I think that's me, people. I think that's our story.
Thank you very much, Tina. Jerome, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. So like Ellen, I just want to reiterate her comments. Thank you very much to the Jobs Fund for the opportunity, and congratulations to the Jobs Fund and JET for a really insightful study. So Black Umbrellas is we're now a virtual incubator. So we've probably moved on from, we made this change in 2019, or we started developing the shift to a virtual incubator from 2019, October 2019, and we launched the virtual incubator about a year later towards the last quarter of 2020. So probably in the middle of this study, we had actually moved across from being a kind of physical bricks and mortar based incubator. So the virtual incubator is now an online platform, accessible anywhere with an internet connection. What Black Umbrellas is about is really running programs that offer training, mentoring, support, and business coaching to entrepreneurs. Our primary focus is on developing businesses. And where we've also made a change in the last 2 years is primarily not just about developing the business for the sake of developing the business. What we're trying to do now is to get towards a demand side of businesses. So we work a lot with organizations in the private sector, and we develop businesses, or we recruit businesses for the inclusion in supply chains of these corporates. And basically, incubator is available to any business at any stage of the development, provided you have an internet connection. So that's Black Umbrellas. In terms of the recommendations that we've adopted, next slide, please. One of what we have done, as I said, in moving across the virtual incubator, and it actually solved some of the recommendations or implemented some of the recommendations in the study, was we are now able to scale via the virtual incubator platform. So previously we were present in 7 of the 9 provinces with a brick and mortar office. We now can basically access nationally, but more so those physical incubators were in large metros, Cape Town, Durban, Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth, etc. Whereas now what we're able to do is to actually get rural participants and informal businesses and people who have an access in terms of transport, which is very relevant today with the petrol price, from actually accessing the services that Black Umbrellas actually provides. And so in doing so, the virtual incubator platform assists with access to those who need it most. And I think that came out in some of the recommendations, that there is I think one of the points that was made by Eleanor was around getting the right participants into the program. What we've also done is to change our program offering to better align with beneficiary expectations. So we've done a lot of introspection. We've done a lot of our own internal studies with beneficiaries on our programs. And what we realized was that we had a very structured program that was over 3 years. And that structured program basically meant that no matter where you were in your developmental journey, you kind of had to fit into that program. And what we're now able to do is to actually tailor make a program specifically for either in a startup or ideation, or someone looking to grow their business, or someone at a stage where they're looking to actually grow through the glass ceiling that's prevalent for them. So what we are busy doing is adding an entrepreneurial relationship competency with our flagship program. And what we're looking to do there is to probably continue the work of the JET study, which is to maintain contact with beneficiaries long beyond the completion of an entrepreneur's participation in a program with us. And then I think most importantly is that we're starting to, with the aspect of rural businesses, of informal businesses coming onto our program, what we're now looking to do is that we're now revisiting our theory of change with a specific focus on the contextual factors, because that actually what happens is that sometimes some of our activities don't necessarily speak to a particular beneficiary. As was mentioned in the beginning, with Najwa says there are human beings, they're not just numbers. And so sometimes in their particular context, an activity does not make sense at that particular time and place. So again, looking at that and bringing that contextual factors and having tailor-made activities for each and every program. And that's Black Umbrellas. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you very much, Jerome. Colleagues, any questions from the chats? One of the things that stood out for Tina and Jerome is that they mentioned what makes them different. And I want to maybe start with you, Tina. You speak about how technology has really allowed you to scale up and support more entrepreneurs. And by doing that, have you been able to reach more entrepreneurs?
Yes, so there's two things that are important here, and I really didn't emphasize the importance around the relationship. Mm-hmm. What the technology allows you to do is measure the impact of your intervention, okay, and therefore point you in the right direction. You cannot use, in order to get people to change behavior, unless you are working with an Uber type product, because Uber changed people's behavior quite fundamentally by just providing information on a top. But when you are working with a complex environment like an entrepreneur who has multiple responsibilities and it's a complex thing, you have to take your time over that. And the relationship with that particular merchant is critical. Mm-hmm. So what we found is when we can hold a relationship with the merchant over a period of time and can journey that merchant from when they start to when they can actually access capital and then stand on their own 2 feet. 70% of our recipients who have accessed capital from us after the Jobs Fund program come back and do it again and are sustainable. So it is a hand-holding exercise and a relationship exercise coupled with the technology that allows you to measure the impact of your intervention, and that's what gives you such a great ROI.
Awesome, thank you, Tina. Technology seems to feature for you as well, Jerome, because you speak about how Black Umbrellas has moved to a virtual incubator. Has that also allowed you to reach more, have more impact and increase your footprint?
Oh, absolutely, it has, Mo. Although I must I must caution against the fact that, you know, having a virtual incubator doesn't necessarily mean you reach a lot more people. It doesn't necessarily mean your reach is effective. So that also comes with its own challenges. The technology allows you to meet more people, but then you actually have to tailor make your activities and your communication and your interaction with the beneficiary to bring in that aspect of digital, because it doesn't happen as it would normally if I'm sitting with you face to face. So it hasn't been easy, but it's something that we're constantly working on and looking to improve.
Much appreciated. Thank you to Tina and Jerome. There's just one question. I think Eleanor just quoted. How do you overcome the digital divide? I think, Jerome, one of the things that you've mentioned is that you've been able to now reach people in rural communities. Maybe the same question could also relate to the both of you. How do you then address the digital divide?
Thank you, Mo. Jerome, I'll quickly answer and then I'll leave over to you. You do it slowly, okay? And you do it methodically. And again, you have to be able to measure what is happening. If you cannot measure what the adoption is. So adoption is critical with technology. And we have found that when we can partner an individual, so our goal is to scale to 10,000 shops. We're sitting at about 5,500 now, and that does require the focus from people, and that's what makes this work different. If you need to invest time in enabling the people to adopt the technology, and if you can invest the correct time and the correct training, and you view it as a behavioral change effort, where the person can hold the skills for a long time. But it is not easy, as Jerome said, it is hard work. It is hard work. And because you are dealing with people as well who are frantic, anxious, bombarded by all sorts of things in the market. And whenever crisis happens, people default to their previous discipline. So getting that change requires a lot of stickiness on behalf of the partner or the coaching division. I think that's me.
Thank you, Tina. Jerome, one last comment in addressing the question.
I think that Tina used a fantastic word, the stickiness. I think that you have got to continually engage with that beneficiary. So you have maybe a learning program that is available digitally, but then you've actually got to compensate that with constant interactions with that individual. And then what we've done as an added aspect to that is what we've taken some of our offices in the metro centers, we've actually scaled them down, and they're not necessarily metro sectors. So we've created little, what we call business lounges. So we've created smaller places where entrepreneurs can actually pop into and interact with other entrepreneurs and use the technology that's there to interact with the platform. So again, it's a hybrid approach, combining the digital as well as the human side of things.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tina and Jerome. Much appreciated. I'm going to hand over to Nadia to do the closing comments. Colleagues, please continue to post any comments and feedback in the session. We will get back to you. Lerato will be sharing the slides and the link to where the presentation will be uploaded. And then we'll also be sharing the summary report on our website soon. The next webinar, which we'll be talking about the case of studies that supporting young people to enter the world of work, will be on the 30th of August. So Nadia, over to you. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Wow, thank you, Mo. Thank you very much. Thank you to James, the JET team, Eleanor, Monica, all of those people who made this possible. Thank you to Jerome and to Tina, and thank you to Vuyo, who leads my M&A team, and to Mo for the presentations, and for all the members of my team who are silently working behind the scenes. I think, as our audience can appreciate, there's a richness of information here. There's a depth of work that has been done, and you know, 1.5 hours might not be sufficient. I'm sure there are many more questions, but we are being very respectful of your time. So a massive thank you to everybody who made this possible, but importantly, also a thank you to all the participants for the lively conversation in the chat, for the thought-provoking questions. You know, I think this really it's important for us to be able to engage, for us to learn from each other and to adopt. I just want to say this as a closing, often we say, yes, but the cost of doing an evaluation. I want to push back and I want to say, the cost of getting it wrong, the cost of not improving your targeting of your scarce resources, measure that against the cost of doing the evaluation. We should not be doing anything without evaluating the impact, because that makes us better. We've spoken about so many times, and even in Jerome and Tina's presentations and their reflections, if we are going to be better at supporting our enterprises and our SMEs, then we definitely have to understand that it cannot be a one-size-fits-all, that we have to provide support and adopt a life cycle approach when we are supporting our SMEs. We have to structure our financial products so that it is appropriate for the various stages in the life cycle of these SMEs. When we talk about regulation, we have to get really specific about what part of the regulations, and there's been comments in the chat, and we need to address that with vigor, because without those things, we are not going to have the kind of impact that we want to have. And so with that, I want to say again, thank you very much for the questions, for the participants, for everybody who's made this possible. Remind you to please complete the survey so that we also understand what we can do as a team to provide you with better experiences as you share with us our learnings from the coalface, in fact. So we've got an interesting one coming up around the basic package of support, where we have designed a pilot program to look at what a basic package of support looks like for young people. And we're going to bring you the results of the pilot that is being rolled out in Atlantis in the Western Cape. There's also a second part to this particular series that focuses on the support for work seekers projects that we have supported. So with that, thank you so much, everybody. Wishing you all a blessed and gentle day further. Thank you.
you.